Let's begin with the news of the COVID-19 pandemic, as the global number of infections has crossed 13 million, with more than 572,000 deaths. Brazil has reported 733 new fatalities, taking its toll to nearly 73,000. In the U.S., more than 60,000 have tested positive overnight, with a total of 3.3 million cases and over 135,000 deaths. This report has the details.
Governments around the world are in a fix to open economies or reimpose restrictions as a powerful second wave of COVID-19 infects tens of thousands every day. In the virus epicenter Latin America, Mexico reported more than 4,500 new cases and close to 500 daily deaths. In the U.S., the most populous state of California has imposed restrictions on businesses and public spaces. Florida has followed suit amid surging cases in defiance of President Donald Trump's push for opening up. But the state stopped short of making face masks mandatory.
The message is, please follow the rules, maintain social distancing, wash your hands, don't touch your face with your hands, and if we all do that, then we can drive this contagion level down, we can stop the rise in the number of people going to the hospital, and then we can get back to normal much faster.
2 lawmakers in Madagascar have died after contracting COVID-19. The British government is making it mandatory to wear masks when they go into a shop from July 24th. The World Health Organization has warned that the pandemic will worsen if countries fail to take more decisive action.
Let me be blunt. Too many countries are headed in the wrong direction. The virus remains public enemy number 1. But the actions of many governments and people do not reflect of this. The only aim of the virus is to find people to infect.
In Asia, Malaysia and Singapore are set to ease border restrictions between the 2 countries to support essential businesses and official traffic. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Disneyland is closing its gates again, less than 1 month after it reopened. South Korea's new virus cases have fallen back to below 40, while China has reported only 3 cases of coronavirus, with no new infections in the capital, Beijing, for 8 straight days.
Here in Pakistan, the death toll from COVID-19 has passed 5,300, with 50 more fatalities in the past 24 hours. The health ministry said nearly 2,000 cases were reported overnight, with the tally crossing 253,000. Officials said that more than 8,700 people recovered from the virus in the past day, with a total over 170,000. The ministry said there are more than 77,000 active cases in the country. It said the province of Sindh reported the most new infections, with 1,089 cases. Punjab province has reported 449 more infections. The capital, Islamabad, has registered 94 new cases. China says it will sanction U.S. weapons manufacturing company Lockheed Martin over its latest arms sale to Chinese-claimed Taiwan. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said Beijing took the decision to safeguard its national interests. Zhao called on Washington to stop selling weapons to Taipei to avoid further harm to mutual ties and stability in the Taiwan Strait. This comes after the U.S. approved a $620 million upgrade package for Patriot surface-to-air missiles for Taiwan. Earlier, Taiwan's defense ministry said the island needed to be strong in the face of threats and provocations from China. Beijing says Washington's rejection of its maritime claims in the South China Sea are completely unjustified. Beijing's embassy in the U.S. has accused Washington of inciting confrontation in the region under the false pretext of preserving stability. Earlier, in an unprecedented move, the U.S. rejected nearly all of Beijing's territorial claims in the area. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the world will not allow China to treat the energy-rich waters as its maritime empire. Pompeo said the U.S. would stand with its Southeast Asian allies and protect their sovereign rights to offshore resources consistent with international law. Japan has also accused Beijing of trying to alter the status quo in the East and the South China Sea under the cover of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the U.S., that country says the Taliban and Kabul have made progress on logistics for intra-Afghan talks, but more progress is needed to counter terrorism. The The U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, said he would press to expedite the prisoner release and other commitments under the Doha Pact. Khalilzad said the U.S. has carried out the first phase of its commitments under the deal by reducing forces and departing 5 bases. He said NATO troops have also come down in proportional numbers. Khalilzad condemned the attack on a government compound, saying it contradicts commitments by the Taliban. The envoy said such action will strengthen those who oppose peace and plays into the hands of spoilers. In a related development, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has discussed the situation in Afghanistan with Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. This follows controversy regarding alleged Russian bounties for Taliban to kill Americans in the country. President Donald Trump's administration has said U.S. agencies have not corroborated the intelligence that Russia paid the Taliban to kill U.S. troops. Russia has also denied those allegations. Earlier this month, the House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Washington should impose sanctions on Russia's intelligence and defense sectors. The State Department said Pompeo also raised the issue of election security with Lavrov as the U.S. readies itself for nationwide voting on November 3rd. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on Armenia and Azerbaijan to immediately stop fighting. This comes after 4 Azeri soldiers were killed as troops from the two countries clashed on their border in a new escalation. Guterres' spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric, said the UN chief has asked both sides to refrain from provocative rhetoric. Earlier, Azerbaijan's defense ministry said Armenian army units tried to attack its positions at the Tovuz section of the border with the use of artillery systems. Armenia's defense ministry has alleged the border situation was aggravated after Azerbaijan's attempted attack. Both countries fight over the highland region of Nagorno-Karabakh, a disputed territory since the breakup of the Soviet Union. Elsewhere, Sudan has declared a state of emergency in its conflict-ridden western region of Darfur after escalating violence and unrest there in 2 towns. The African Union UN mission in Darfur said it sent a team to Khartoum town following the reported burning of a police station by unidentified protesters. Eyewitnesses said an unidentified militia attacked a sit-in in Fata Borno village on Monday, killing more than a dozen people. A day earlier, security forces violently broke up another protest camp in the region. Demonstrators called for better security conditions and an end to attacks by government-sanctioned armed groups. State governor positions are held in Sudan by military officers despite the toppling of autocrat Omar al-Bashir in April. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, thousands of opposition activists have marched across the capital Kinshasa against the nomination of the Election Commission's new head. Demonstrators braved the rain to voice their opposition to the proposed appointment of Ronsard Malonda. Critics in Congo say Malonda is too close to former President Joseph Kabila, who still wields strong influence. Police used tear gas to disperse crowds at another protest near Parliament and in the east of the capital. Last week, at least 3 people died in nationwide protests over Malonda's appointment. Jordan says Israel's plans to annex the occupied West Bank will dim hopes for a final settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict. King Abdullah said the only path to lasting peace in the Middle East was the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. A palace statement said the king condemned any unilateral Israeli measure to annex lands in the West Bank. He warned annexation will fuel instability in the region. Jordan has led a diplomatic campaign, along with many European countries that oppose Israel's seizure plans. In recent months, King Abdullah warned that Israeli policies, along with the so-called U.S. peace plan, devastate Israeli-Jordanian relations. On to Lebanon, where 14 rights organizations have accused the government of using repression and intimidation to crack down on dissent. The Coalition to Defend Freedom of Expression in Lebanon is comprised of international and domestic watchdogs, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. The Coalition to Defend Freedom of Expression in Lebanon said that more than 3,500 were interrogated on charges of defamation over the past 4 years. That is an average of about 2 people questioned per day by just one of the country's main 4 security agencies. The Cybercrimes Bureau, the Lebanese Army, General Security, and State Security also regularly interrogate and detain activists. New arrests have spiked since October 2019, when the country witnessed its biggest ever mass protests. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said she cannot guarantee that EU states will reach an agreement on a COVID-19 recovery fund this week. Speaking alongside the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, she said the positions of member states remain different. Merkel said Italy and Germany agreed on the basis structure of EU proposals. She said the proposal will be discussed on Friday at the EU summit. Conte said EU states must work hard to avoid splitting the union in north and south, east and west. He said Italy is working on a recovery plan and wants such a plan to be accepted by European institutions. In France, meanwhile, the government has agreed to give a pay raise worth $9 billion to health workers as it hailed their role in fighting COVID-19. The government signed a deal with trade unions after 7 weeks of fraught negotiations. Under the deal, the monthly pay of health workers will rise by some $207 on average. At the signing ceremony, France's new Prime Minister Jean Castex said it is a recognition of the frontline soldiers in the fight against COVID-19.
This is a historic moment for our health system. The state has cleared a budget of more than 8 billion euros for its health system, embodied by those who support it on a daily basis. That is to say, all the personnel, whatever their category, their establishment and their services.
I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Let's begin this segment of the Bulletin in the U.S., where 17 states and more than 200 universities are taking legal action against the Trump administration's new restrictions on international students. They argued that the policy promises, or compromises, I should say, on students' safety and forces institutions to reconsider new plans for the coming semester. The law said international students cannot stay in the U.S. if they can take all their classes online in the coming academic year. Universities have supported Harvard and Massachusetts Institute of Technology as they have sued the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Boston. 17 states and the District of Columbia filed their own lawsuits, arguing the rule is politically motivated. Other suits have come from Johns Hopkins University and the state of California. Mexico has raised the number of people listed as officially disappeared in the country to over 73,000. The new government tally shows an increase of some 11,500 on the January count, underscoring the abuses since the country began its war on drugs. A quarter of the missing are women, and the tally includes over 12,000 children, most of them girls. Authorities said the disappeared mostly suffered crimes from kidnapping to homicide, while some were likely victims of sex trafficking and forced labor. The government said authorities and civil society have discovered over 6,600 bodies from mass graves since December 2006. Activists say Mexicans have disappeared at the hands of organized crime and the government, with the line between both entities often blurred. The United Nations says Pakistan has achieved the UN's Sustainable Development Goal for protecting the environment and holding off climate change. The UN Development Programme said Islamabad attained SDG 13 well before the 2013 deadline. The bloc said it celebrated the milestone and the strategic partnership with Pakistan's Ministry of Climate Change. UNDP said it is crucial that to limit the increase in global means temperature to 2 degrees Celsius or less. In a separate statement, the ministry said Pakistan has achieved a crucial milestone on the road to environmental protection. The UN's Sustainable Development Goals were adopted to address risks across economic, social, and environmental domains. The UN says COVID-19 could possibly push another 132 million people into chronic hunger by December. In a new report, the bloc called on governments to adopt a set of policy tools to help people afford quality and nutritious food. The report said the pandemic is also contributing to an increase in obesity in poor populations which struggle to access nutritious food. The bloc said policies such as direct and indirect taxation that penalize food and agricultural production must be avoided. The report also urged low-income countries to revisit and increase subsidies in the food and agriculture sectors. A recent study says Britain is home to at least 100,000 modern slaves, 10 times more than the official estimate. A report by the anti-slavery charity Justice and Care and the think tank the Center for Social Justice warns 90% of victims go undetected. The charity said actual number can be even higher and warned that the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to push more people into forced labor. The charity's chief executive, Christian Guy, said more work is needed to combat the issue. He said the landmark 2015 anti-slavery law created a false sense of security. Home Secretary Priti Patel said her department will look closely at the report's findings. Patel said the UK is just getting started in its fight to rid this evil. In Singapore, meanwhile, the economy has suffered a record contraction in the second quarter, tipping it into recession for the first time since 2009. In a statement, the Ministry of Trade and Industry data says GDP in the city-state shrank by over 41% compared to the previous quarter. The ministry said Singapore's second quarter GDP shrank over 12.5% on a year-on-year basis. The contraction followed a first quarter year-on-year GDP fall of over 2% and quarter-on-quarter drop of over 10.5%. MTI forecast it will be Singapore's worst recession since independence from Britain in 1965. To support its COVID-19 hit economy, the government has already pledged about $67 billion in stimulus measures. Glamour, glitz, and engineering masterclass are on show at the Bangkok International Motor Show, which opened today. The 12-day event will feature displays and demonstrations by major automakers. The event showcases thousands of vehicles from 35 car brands and 16 motorcycle manufacturers. The motor show will feature the Asia premiere of the much-talked-about limited edition Aston Martin Valkyrie. Organizers say the event is being held with all necessary precautions amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Thailand has reported no domestic transmission in more than a month. Croatia says it will need to wait at least 2 more years to participate in the European exchange rate mechanism. That was announced at the 6th session of the National Council for Introduction of Euro in the capital Zagreb. The finance minister Zdravko Maric said the country can only enter ERM2 after meeting nominal Maastricht criteria. Maric said the 2-year period will allow Zagreb to prepare and fulfill those measures. The Croatian National Bank Governor Boris Vujicic said the central bank will supervise banks in collaboration with the European Central Bank. China has allocated $85 million for flood relief and has mobilized 6 ministerial-level teams to assist flood-hit regions. The state flood control and drought relief headquarters said it has dispatched the teams to 7 provinces, including Jiangxi, Anhui, and Hunan. China's Ministry of Emergency Management official Xu Xianbiao said monitoring at-risk riverbanks was their top priority. Xu said they had increased the patrol forces along the endangered embankments and had appropriate contingency plans.
Yang Lake is only less than 2 meters from where we are standing, and there are 6 to 7 meters of drop between the water level ahead of us and that in the farmland behind. The high water level of Poyang Lake is expected to remain for another 20 days. The current priority for our flood control work is to enhance patrol forces for round-the-clock monitoring against risks along the embankments and be prepared with contingency plans in case of any emergency.
Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. Well, for the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.news. Thanks for watching.